When people talk about instability in Balochistan, the conversation usually goes in a familiar direction: resource exploitation, state repression, separatist violence. And yes, those issues matter. But there's another layer here that often gets missed: governance failure. Not just as one problem among many, but as the force that keeps the wider cycle of instability alive. In northern Balochistan, that cycle shows up through 5 deeply connected realities: governance failure, socioeconomic deprivation, ethno-nationalism, violence, and organized crime. They do not exist in isolation. They reinforce each other. Weak governance feeds deprivation, deprivation sharpens grievance, grievance strengthens militancy and criminal networks, and all of that further erodes state authority. That is the loop. And the numbers help explain why this environment is so difficult to stabilize. Balochistan is Pakistan's largest province by land, but it contains only 6.2% of the country's population. It also has the lowest population density in Pakistan, at 42.9 people per square kilometer. The district level figures are just as revealing. Quetta has a population of roughly 2.59 million, with a density of 752.97 people per square kilometer. Dera Bukti, on the other hand, has just over 355,000 people spread across more than 10,000 square kilometers, with a density of only 34.97. Then look at education. The percentage of people who never attended school stands at 54.58% in Chaman, 52.82% in Kila Saifullah, and 59.18% in Dera Bukti. Even Quetta stands at 32.31%. Those are not just development statistics, they're indicators of exclusion. So what does governance failure actually look like on the ground? It looks like corruption becoming routine. It looks like institutions losing credibility. It looks like policy being inconsistent, selective, and often disconnected from local realities. Locals describe corruption inside agencies such as Customs, NADRA, and the FIA. One especially striking detail is that around 70,000 to 80,000 CNICs were blocked over suspicions that they belong to Afghan citizens. That points to institutional weakness with very real political and security consequences. And then there's policy incoherence. In Chaman, the one document policy triggered a 6-month sit-in. What might have looked like an administrative reform on paper ended up fueling public resentment because it collided with long-established border livelihoods and a pre-existing trust deficit. That is a recurring pattern here. When governance is weak, even reform can become destabilizing. The socioeconomic side of this is just as severe. People speak repeatedly about the lack of jobs, factories, roads, schools, and healthcare. In Dera Bukti, many families depend heavily on the energy sector, but employment opportunities have narrowed as gas-related hiring has declined. One local account notes that 150 people had already retired from the Loti gas field, while another 50 to 60 were close to retirement with no meaningful replacement in sight. When lawful opportunities shrink like that, the appeal of smuggling, armed groups, or informal survival economies becomes much stronger. Healthcare figures make the crisis even harder to ignore. Balochistan's maternal mortality rate is reported at 785 per 100,000 live births, while infant mortality stands at 97 per 1,000 live births. In some areas, women reportedly die on the way to hospitals because the facilities simply are not there. In education, there are complaints about ghost teachers in Dera Bukti and schools near Quetta without even basic infrastructure like roofs. So when people say the state is absent, they're not always speaking in ideological terms. Often, they mean something painfully literal. Not only through history or identity, but through lived exclusion. In places like Chaman, economic survival, border movement, and political identity overlap in ways outsiders often underestimate. One respondent says roughly 15,000 to 20,000 local traders cross the border daily. That means governance decisions at the border do not stay administrative for long. They become economic questions, then political questions, and eventually questions of identity and belonging. Violence grows in that same environment. It is not just local grievance. It's also shaped by cross-border dynamics, militant facilitation, and regional linkages. Accounts repeatedly point to networks tied to Afghanistan, and in some narratives, broader external involvement is also mentioned. The result is that unrest is not contained within district lines. It becomes harder, more mobile, and more deeply embedded. And then there's organized crime, which is not some side story here. It's part of the same ecosystem. In border areas, smuggling and trafficking are often normalized as survival strategies. 2 of the 3 major smuggling routes from Afghanistan reportedly pass through Balochistan towards Iran and the Persian Gulf. In Dera Bukti, insurgent financing is described as coming through kidnapping, extortion, livestock theft, and illegal taxation. One account even mentions a wedding payment of 6,000 rupees being extracted, with higher demands placed on government workers and company employees. That tells you something important. Instability is not just political, it becomes economic routine. It means instability in northern Balochistan is not being sustained by one issue alone. It's being reproduced by a system. Weak governance is at the center of it. It drives deprivation, weakens trust, widens identity-based resentment, and creates space for violence and criminal enterprise. And once that cycle hardens, every part of the crisis starts feeding the next. That's the real warning here. Until governance becomes more consistent, more credible, and more present in people's daily lives, instability will keep regenerating, even when the actors change, even when the slogans change, and even when the headlines move on.